caught up in listening to these guys. I'm a big fan of both of their cultivation facilities. I, like probably a lot of these guys and other growers in here, essentially got to the industry out of being a pretty intense connoisseur, right? Really loving the flower, wanting to figure out how it was made, right? What are the different varieties? What is this thing all about? Kind of back in the day, I was on the East Coast and I was looking at High Times magazines, right? And I'm looking at the weed that I'm smoking, and I'm looking at the High Times magazine, and I'm like, there's a big, a big gap in between here that I want to understand. What is this gap to get to this type of cannabis? So I actually was an engineer. I was there with Siemens doing a lot of power generation stuff, but also found myself in the energy efficiency world as a certified energy manager, and helped to start their business unit, energy efficiency and environmental solutions in the industrial realm. And essentially, when I was, in that area, right, it reminds me a lot of what's happening now or will happen in the cannabis industry. In that, at that time, right, there weren't a lot of energy concerns. There weren't, these high oil prices as we started to see more in the, 2000s, right? It was kind of more business as usual. It doesn't really matter what your costs are because we're selling it for so much that there's no way it can really compare. But as as I got into that world, things started changing with the oil prices, right? And the energy prices started going up, and people started talking about climate change, right? And things like that. And the energy, or at least the engineering world, started to catch on. Who remembers back in the day where General Electric had this like dancing elephant in the rain, right? I'm singing in the rain, and right? I mean, there's this engineering behemoth essentially coming in and saying, hey, we're going to spend all this money and all these advertising dollars and essentially revamp a lot of our platform in order to capture this energy efficiency wave that's coming, right? And they saw it from two different areas, right? They saw it from the costs kind of going up, right? And that's, kind of was one that really triggered them more. But they also saw it from the consumer standpoint, right? And that people were actually making purchasing decisions based on these things, right? The things that made them feel like it was a smart decision for them. So they jumped all in. And I was at Siemens, which was kind of they call the General Electric of Europe, right? So they're kind of looking at what's happening in the U.S., and they wanted to jump into that as well. So we started that business unit, got a chance to go around to a lot of industrial facilities and get more of an understanding of, why are we making these decisions? What are the potential opportunities? Where's the low-hanging fruit, right? And the things that we can pick up and do really quickly and easily that we can, see a faster payback time. Ended up going over to Germany, and then that's where I kind of explored more of my connoisseur with the cannabis that I was seeing in the High Times, right? Where I was going to Amsterdam pretty much every weekend, and everyone's like, hey, we're going to the beer garden. Where are you coming with us, right? It's Friday. And I'm like, I got a flight to Amsterdam. I don't tell anybody that, but I'm like, yeah, I'm just traveling, right? So I'm spending a lot of time there, and then, more of that understanding of that gap kind of comes into play. And then I just happened to get an opportunity to come to Portland, Oregon with a sales position. And when I got to that sales position, the first thing I did, actually, before I got to the office, my first day was I went to the dispensary and bought a clone, right? And sat there with that clone out in the backyard and went and got a light and went and got 2 lights and went and got all these different things, right? Trying to outfit this and spending more time at the grow shop, right? Trying to ask different questions about bugs and pesticides and all that than I was making appointments for Siemens, right? So before I got fired, I decided that, I wanted to jump into this cannabis industry thing and go full time. So in doing that, was around the same time I learned about Resource Innovation Institute and met Derek. And during that time, right, I'm realizing and seeing all this low-hanging fruit that's out there in this grow room and just my garage. I'm like, why are they doing things like this? Why is this the equipment that I'm purchasing instead of this smart relay, right? Why am I buying all these different timers instead of buying one piece of maybe a PLC? I mean, a relay more so at that level would be smarter. So I just started thinking about all these different things and, understanding that the cannabis industry had all these different opportunities, right? And as I started kind of going from 1 light to 2 lights to 3 lights, I started implementing other things like water-cooled lights, I started implementing, definitely I took the smart relay or PLC that I mentioned out of my briefcase that I should have been trying to sell. And I still had it because I didn't sell it. It was still there, and I wired that up and programmed that to be the first essentially PLC that we had in our facility when I started out in the gorge in the Columbia Gorge. So as we started going there, again, just started implementing more things. And at this point, we've moved over from what was a 2,000 square foot indoor facility. Well, what started was a couple hundred square feet down to my basement, then to my garage, and then my girlfriend left because she said it feels like I'm living in a grow room. Just everywhere was plants. I mean, every room and everything. I was just completely obsessed, right? But I had found my love, and within that love, I was able to find some things that I had learned from that energy efficiency world that I can implement. So, what I really am here to say, more so than a case study and on a number of things, I'd like to talk about a few things we've implemented. Of course, one of the things is more so, in addition to in a different light spectrum, also intelligent lighting design, right? And the way that we do that at our facility, of course, with the help of Energy Trust as well, is we haven't quite moved over to the LEDs. I'm looking forward to being able to allocate a room to learning more with LEDs. But at the same time that I have this, deeper understanding or deeper love for energy efficiency, I also don't have the deep pockets that I would like to be able to invest in some of these things quite yet. So just like you said, right, we're doing LEDs, but we have LEDs in the corner of the room where we have a number of other like high intensity lights, right? And I know that I'm not getting everything out of them that I could, but I'm still getting some data points, right? And we're still getting to that next level. We've implemented some LEDs in our bedroom, but what we've done in our flower room is we are using plasma lights in addition to some of the traditional double-ended lights. So with that, of course, we're looking at quality, and we're, as I mentioned, I'm a very connoisseur-focused consumer, so that's how we grow. So quality is always one of the most important things, right? But you can also achieve quality with different lighting spectrums, right? It's not just quality loves HID. There's nothing wired in this plant that is moving towards HID, right? It's really understanding how these lighting spectrums are interacting with your genetics. And with doing that, we've implemented different lighting spectrums, the HID, which is typical, but the plasma, again, which is a 300-watt light. And it doesn't replace the HID, but it replaces some of the wattage that we would typically need from that HID. And it gives us that wattage in a much more efficient light, but also it gives us that wattage in a different spectrum of light, which really, again, plays into that quality. But with the energy efficiency, not only the fact that it's a 300-watt light versus a 1,000-watt light, we're only using that plasma light at the first hour, sometimes the first hour and a half, and the last hour of that grow cycle. So essentially, those HID lights are only on somewhere between 9 and 10 hours a day, which is almost 20, sometimes over 20% of the savings right there, with still being able to use some of the lighting technology that you're comfortable with, or that your growers. Trust me, I fought my partner, who's a better grower than I am. We fight tooth and nail all the time at some of these energy efficiency measures, and essentially data points are the only way to move them over, right? You can't say, I think it's this way, or I feel like it's that way, or this guy gave me this brochure that says that it should do this. They're not, that's probably going to make them look the opposite way, right? Because they've gone through that so many times. But really figuring out, hey, what matters? How can we analyze these data points, collect these data points first in a way that essentially is focused on the scientific method, right? Reducing your variables so that you can really study one thing that's happening in that plant. Let's take those data points and then let's move there slowly. But as we all know, the harvest moves by so quickly, right? Those 2 months that you're in that flowering room, and you're worried about spraying and pesticides and and this and that, those things, right, would much rather be served if or additional, right, taking those data points and making sure that each and every harvest, you're understanding what are your energy triggers, right? What are your water triggers, and how can you make sure that you're better on that? And it sounds difficult, and it is difficult in a sense until you start writing things down and start understanding what you care about. If we care about flower density, then we need to figure out a way to really study flower density under these different lighting spectrums, right? In a way that is really systematic. If we care about THC percentage, right, all these different things, we need to figure out a way to study that, as opposed to what we've traditionally done as growers is look at flower and say, oh, that's a winner, right? You know, or put it in the market and say that's a winner. There's a lot of other things that we have to collect. So in addition to some of those things like lighting spectrums, one of the other things that we've done at our facility is we take a lot of data, right? There's a lot of different data loggers that we have in the facility, and we look at that on a regular basis. And it's not just me looking at it, but when I'm sitting down with my growers, when I'm sitting down with even my trimmers, whenever we're in there talking, we're looking at those things and we're talking about what matters to the health of our facility. And that goes back again to my old world, right? And the Department of Energy did a study that said that of 100% of energy savings at any industrial facility, over 40% of that can be found by just communicating what's happening at that facility, and that people care about that, right? So that is maybe not as much in I guess a facility that has lower variables in a pulp and paper mill, maybe not quite 40%, but if you can even get 10, 20% of savings, not only are you doing that, but you're also more so, as Robert mentioned, is fostering into those feelings of these are the things that matter. These are the things that this business is all about. And that goes back again to kind of my first example, in that the consumer cares about this. So it's not just about that payback period. It's not just about that lower energy bill, right? It's about, as we mentioned in the state of Oregon, how can we market better to consumers who care about these things? How can we make sure that people know that this is ingrained in our business? Those are going to trigger buying decisions at that dispensary, right? And I know that Robert is doing that. As he's bringing people in, he's talking about all those things that are happening at his facility, and he's doing so well because those bud tenders are there. And I've been there, and I've been an owner of a dispensary that has purchased Robert's flower. They're talking about that. They're saying, yeah, 7 Points, they're doing these different things. They're collecting their water. They're reusing these things. And if you're a consumer and you see some cannabis that is pretty much the same price, maybe it's even $1 more, and you learn about all these different things that are coming into that process, are you going to pay $1 more? I would. It's really negligible. So we got to think about this thing as a whole and not just about the dollars. And I know it's difficult in Oregon, but things are growing, things are getting better, and things are becoming more nationwide and more global soon, right? And these things that are ingrained into Portland, into Oregon, need to be ingrained into our business so that we can, continue to exemplify those things. Some of the other things that we've implemented, in addition to intelligent lighting strategy, as Robert mentioned, is water recapture, right? So the dehumidified water that he mentioned, we didn't know how much water we were dumping into the drain, right, with that dehumidifier. We had no idea. We just see it dripping, right, steadily throughout the day. Sometimes it's streaming a little bit. You go outside and maybe you see a little puddle where that, dehumidification water is going out. And we're like, okay, well, we need to collect it. We don't need to waste that water. So whatever we use it for, it's going to be better than just wasting it, right? Whether we just use it for spraying, or we didn't know what we were going to use it for, spraying oils or whatever, beneficial bacteria, nutrients, whatever. And when we started to collect that, as Robert mentioned, and I think he mentioned this to me before, as we were implementing it, we're pulling in over 50% of the water that we're using to water those plants every day. We're pulling out of the air and we're cleaning that water. And what I'm using to clean the water, Robert's been doing it longer and probably a little smarter with the different pumps and different things that he's using. But I went the kind of the cheap way, but essentially it just came out recently. So it may not have been available at the time you were starting and doing that stuff. He's ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. But there's something called the automated reclaimed condensate system. Done by Hydrologic, which is a company that we're all using, most cultivators are using for water filtration, that essentially is using that, right? It's specifically for reclaiming dehydrated water, water that's coming out of your humidifiers and your ACs, and cleaning that, remineralizing it, taking it through a UV filter, and then we pump it right back into our nutrient, our cold water reservoir. So not only have we just, again, used half of our water bill cut in half, but also that's just sparked more in us. As we take each and every step, we're now implementing, or we're in the process next month of implementing a rainwater catchment system, right? In hopes of catching that extra 50% so we can be completely water neutral. So, I mean, that's something that's very easy. That's something that really just takes the idea of, hey, I need to get with this group who's talking about these things. I need to learn about what everyone else is doing. I need to talk about this stuff in my facility. I need to talk about this stuff to my customers, to the bud tenders, right? And I think people will really get more of an understanding of what made these billion-dollar engineering companies dump billions of dollars into changing their whole methodology, changing how they want to market themselves in the new world that we're in right now. And essentially that is the fact that it's bigger than just the savings, right? And that's why Robert mentioned if it was just the savings, maybe all this stuff doesn't pencil out. But there's so many other things in there, especially as we're talking about this growing industry that's becoming more global and way more opportunities to differentiate your business and differentiate your methodologies. I mean, those things are invaluable. You know, I mean, the fact that Robert told me that he, reclaimed his water, right, 50%. If I'm a consumer of cannabis, I'm probably gonna purchase more of that cannabis, right, to help to factor in that payback period, and then me and a number of other people. So we got to think a lot more in depth about this. It's not just dollars and cents as we can see them. It's the fact that there's this growing industry, there's this growing movement in the world, there's this growing emotion that's captured in these consumers each and every day that makes it more feasible and makes it more important and essential for us to start moving in these directions. So the things that we're doing here right now, and as I mentioned, this is one of the most important things, is saying, hey, we care about this. We're going to take out the time to sit down. Hey, we can, as a solution provider, go and talk to more consumers about what's happening in the energy efficiency world in the cannabis industry. Those are the things essentially that are going to move us more towards sustainability and are going to make all of our businesses more profitable, whether we're cultivators, whether we're equipment providers, whether we're service providers, whether we're retailers. It doesn't really matter. We got to ingrain this as one of the cornerstones of growth of the cannabis industry in general.